All right, for our call out today, I wanted to have just a quick discussion. We've seen, like the religion has become, particularly in the evangelical community, has become a touch point in political discussions. You've seen some evangelicals come out and say that the mainstream evangelicals have become too political or too aligned with the right wing in America, and that those aren't the messages that are Christ-like, so to speak. And then the others, we've seen people come out and say that the stuff Christ was talking about may be too soft for the modern environment, and that a tougher approach is needed from a Christian standpoint. So, wanted to discuss this just from the context of like the what we know about the figure that Jesus Christ was. Like a lot of the things we attribute to him are things that seem very like you're supposed to care for your neighbor and things like that. They don't seem very aggressive and about putting people in their place or dominating other people, which we see a lot. So your thoughts, Jesus, what we know about Jesus, where do you see kind of this fight for the messaging that the real Christians, whoever that, the real Christians are supposed to be taking this as far as who's spreading the word of Christ?
That's a good question. I think it's a great example for a lot of people how they see what they want to see within the greater story that's being told. And we've seen this politically with documents like the Constitution, and we see it religiously. Here we're talking about the Bible, but I think every religion probably has this same strand of certain people in the religion that just see what they want to see and maybe avoid other parts of the holy book that may not fit into their mindset,
Well, to your point, there's no large religion where everybody kind of follows the same doctrine. There's sects of every major religion has different sects, and then they're like they're kind of different here, they're kind of different there.
Well, I think that's what's interesting about the religious text itself, because there's examples one can pull if they want out of everything, right? Like, I think it's Leviticus where they talk about a man shouldn't lay with another man. So if you want to say that the Bible has anything in it that's anti-gay, you can point to that. But then later in Leviticus, it says that someone that commits adultery should be murdered, should be killed for that sin. So my point is, but the same people I hear talking about, the citing Leviticus against homosexuality, that might be the same pastor that's been cheating on his wife. He's not over there supporting the latter part of Leviticus that says an adulterer should be murdered. So I just think that it's one of those examples where, especially as someone like myself that's not really religious personally, coming from the outside looking in at religious doctrine in general and what I've been exposed to, I'd say what would attract me to a religion like Christianity would be the softer sides of what I heard about Jesus, like helping the poor and the weak and trying to find, my better angels as a human being, not necessarily the smoting someone in an eye for an eye. So, maybe the eye for an eye stuff turns on more, different type of people than me.
Well, I think that's what it is. I think it's not just reading into it what you want to read into it. It's also so I think people are there for different reasons. Some people are in religion for like that spiritual connection, and some people are in religion for instructions on how to live a good life. And then other people are there because they like that you could use religion to tell people what to do, other people what to do. And so when it comes to that, like a person who's there because they want to tell other people what to do or how to live, or they want to dominate other people, they're going to naturally gravitate towards the pieces they can pull out that are about dominating people or telling other people what to do. The thing I think that makes it very interesting about Christianity is that you have the figure Jesus Christ, who the stories about him were all about a certain way that he lived his life, and it wasn't any, like you could say, people talked about like, the Old Testament God versus the New Testament God, and how, the Old Testament God may have been more aggressive and, spiteful and so forth. And the New Testament God is more about forgiveness and all that. But there actually is, like Christ, like follower of Christ, there is description and discussion on the thought process of Jesus and the way he went about, how he would treat his quote unquote enemies, or that he would pray for the people that were against him and so forth like that. And so I think it's made more interesting with Christianity because you have this, it's not just the text. where the text itself, you and I know because of us, currently reading Nexus, the text itself is a curated text. It's not like that's all the stuff that was written. Those are the selected pieces that were put into the text, but the text itself has enough ambiguity that you can kind of pick and choose. But the person, the written descriptions of that person, it's much less ambiguous, And so, I do see where people are calling out and saying, hey, I don't know if we should be going so aggressive towards a political party in the name of God, in the name of Christianity here, like that makes a lot of sense to me, because it's like, it doesn't seem like the descriptions of Jesus that I've read, it doesn't seem like he would be out here, going for, a super right wing, this stuff, we got to get more aggressive, and everything like that now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's what I was going to say, as a non-religious person, if I actually look at the life of Jesus Christ as described in the New Testament and who he was as a person, it's actually a beautiful story. I mean, and the idea of, the Christian faith, which I understand it, which is that God sent his only son down to earth to die for the sins of the rest of us. I mean, it's actually a very profound story and a very actually beautiful story. And something that one would say, yeah, that's a story I'd like to emulate the way that man lived his life. And this is what I'm fascinated by it, that I feel like I'm not religious, but I appreciate the story of Jesus. And I feel I don't need to go to a church every week to have a moral compass, much more so than a lot of people that I see that do wear their religion on their sleeve and then point at the rest of us and say that we're not godly based on their definition. And, it's like that whole famous saying that Jesus has that most people have heard of, let he without sin cast the first stone.
Yeah.
And
there's
that's
not a lot of that going on.
Correct. And that's what I mean. That's a profound story, because the story was of a woman who was being accused of adultery, and she was being taken to the town square to be stoned to death. Which is legal in Afghanistan now. It's amazing. But the idea is that he went in front of the crowd and said, hey, if any of you guys have never sinned, then I want you, who out there who hasn't sinned, you got to throw the first stone. And obviously no one could throw a stone because everybody in the crowd had done something wrong. And I think that even goes back to, the discussion we just had on the Robert Reich documentary, this idea of us talking to each other. Yeah. And what we've done is we've kind of abdicated our national and cultural discourse to people who don't want us talking to each other. And they want to use people like the stories of a beautiful story of someone like Jesus, instead of for what it could be used for, to help people find their better angels. They want to use Jesus like a mascot. Yeah. And put him on the front of a truck with an AR-15 on it and say that he was a badass. Like, that's not the Jesus that they talk about. So you know what I mean? Like,
one of my favorite, quotes is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. But yet you see, see this, that disconnect as well. Like, I thought we were supposed to be trying to help the poor, not trying to punish the poor. Or, say, hey, I don't know. That's on them.
It's their fault they're poor.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't sound like something that Jesus was saying. And so, I think that, one of the people that have brought this, and we've done a show talking about it before, but that brought this to a head is like Russell Moore, and who's an evangelical and, leader and editor of Christianity Today. And he's brought a lot of this to the forefront in terms of, hey, how can you can we be more about the teachings of Christ than about using Christ as a mascot for other things we just may want to do. And so do you think this is something that kind of is just inherent, built in to kind of our experience? Or do you think that this is kind of like an this is a way to, for power that people have learned. And this is kind of like, we're seeing tactics being performed that doesn't necessarily have to be this way, so to speak, or do you think it's inherent?
No, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, clearly, it's been well documented. We've talked about it on enough shows that, at the end, we still have our primal instincts as humans, and we still are tribal. We still want to congregate in groups. We don't want to be pushed out of the tribe, so to speak. So humans, we're always going to have, I'm sure, these, until we evolve out of this, which I'm not going to be alive for, we're going to have for the rest of my life, I'm sure we'll have these clusters and these groups and people, congregating together for one certain belief that don't trust people with another belief, so on and so forth. Now, to your point on the second question, yes, I think there's some of that too. I think that's where we may see these ebbs and flows in society historically, where at times of tension and stress, like now, as we talk about things like populism and the population being a little bit upset, can people then, some actors in the society, raise up in power by using certain parts of religious doctrine to divide us, or the feelings about religion or the negative feelings about other religions, like scaring people that Sharia law might be implemented in the United States? Yeah, I think that's definitely been something we've been living under for a while now in this country. And that's not unique to the United States. I mean, that's worldwide. And that's why I believe it's partly a human thing. So I think it is both.
Yeah.
The answer.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that in terms of when you look at religion broadly, like there's a social code aspect to it. Like we have people living together. So what is in place to allow, for people to operate socially together and not and minimize the effect of antisocial people, or kind of cast out antisocial people, like something like that, or just basically limit how much people being antisocial can affect the overall group. And so there's that part of it. And, like there's the part of it of finding a greater meaning, to life that many people like to explore inward on. But both of those are, again, and this is kind of just like what you're in it for, both of those are like, there is, whether it's religion based or based on other things, there are certain people that do like to control other people and tell other people what to do. And religion isn't unique in this. It's just one of the ways that people who are like that, that's one of the ways you can do it. You can say, hey, I can either get rich and tell people what to do, or I can become very religious and tell people what to do. And so I think that it is built in. It's not inherent that those kind of people will be empowered, though. And that's kind of the piece that I think will ebb and flow over time. So I agree with you that it's one of those answers that it's not like a overly simple answer, yes or no. It's like it depends. Society can have things in place, like tolerance and frameworks that can say, hey, you can believe something and you can live your life that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you tell everybody else to live their life that way because you believe that. And that's always been one of the things that the disconnect to me is just like, I really like, I'll see people that rail about things that shouldn't happen in society, but then actually be doing them in their real life. And then it's like, well, hold up. The first thing you should be doing if you're saying something is wrong is not doing it yourself, but again, that person's not looking for the spiritual, for that spiritual connection or the deeper meaning or the social code from religion. They're only there for telling other people what to do, and it's unrelated to how they think they should live their life or the connection they're trying to have. So I think it's interesting in that sense that it's a study on different people's psychology, and where this affects us all is really more so what's going on in society, on whether these people like that are ascendant, or whether those people are kind of exposed for hypocrisy and things like that, or not, or not.
Well, I think that's the key is, are they exposed? And that's generally why those type of personalities don't like transparency because they don't want to be exposed. But that's a great point. I think you're right. And I think where religion, unfortunately, is done a disservice by our society, but I totally understand why, because of the way humans have dealt with each other when there's a religion they don't like. And let's look at the history of anti-Semitism as a great example. But, I'm thinking of something like the Archdiocese in a lot of parts of the United States right now. And there was a recent, I think I shared with you an article I saw in the last week, where there was, I think it was the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, where they were, again, found to have molested a bunch of kids and up until recently. For decades, up until like 3 years ago. And it's just like, how come, it's not, and that's definitely, I want to be clear, not a knock on the Catholic Church, Christianity, or any of the religion. It's like you said, the people who unfortunately do ascend into ranks of power sometimes in all religions, and then they want to hide everything. And I think,
but that's also an institutional failure too. That's the people, but then that's also the institution. If it happens and then they deal with it right away, then it's the people. If it happens and they cover it up and it continues over a long period of time, you do have to look at the institution.
Well, that's where I also feel like you're right about the institution, but there's a deference that our society pays from a legal standpoint to religion, and that's what I mean. I understand it, especially after World War II and all that you don't want to just go and attack a religion and, oh, you guys are just doing this because of your religion, not because of, a couple bad actors in there. And so I'm thinking of like, why isn't law enforcement and why isn't this system, and why aren't we looking at things like that more and saying, just like we talk about other sectors of industry or our society, why don't we as a population say, why do we have these bad actors? Like you're saying, why are we allowing these Catholic priests to even get moved around and all that? Why don't they just go to jail like other pedophiles? Like, but I get it that as a society, we also aren't comfortable attacking like a religion.
I don't know if
Catholics
that is. I don't know if that's it, though. I think that because I don't think if you brought the fact of the matter to a jury, somebody couldn't say, "Well, I'm a priest," and they would just get off. I think that really what it is, and this is actually the response I gave you. You sent that to me, and you were like, "How come people aren't like outraged and talking about this? How come this isn't front page news?" What I told you was that it's because it doesn't defy people's expectations. It's not shocking or surprising to people, and so. That is the worst. Yeah, that to me, like saying I said it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. You know, like I didn't think of how bad it was when I first said it. But it's like, yeah, like that type of thing is not something that's shocking to us anymore. And so I think the outrage in society that we would need to create the change like that isn't there. And I don't know what that says, you know, but that's terrifying that something like that can happen. Like there was one in the Chicago, it was a couple years ago, same kind of thing. And it's like people pay attention, you know, people see it and it's like, but nobody's like, oh my God, how could this happen? We need to change everything we're doing, which you would think that that's the kind of thing that you would get that response. That's how I feel. But that's not the normal response. And so the fact that we've been desensitized to that, or that it doesn't strike us as odd enough to be outraged about it. And I'm saying us, and large, you know, by and large, based on the reaction of society, based on the fact that algorithms don't pick it up and show it to everybody nonstop. Because if based on our own behavior, we know if the algorithms thought it was going to get people outraged, they would show it to people nonstop. And so, you know, that to me is the biggest. I don't know that it's a conscious difference as much as just I don't know what's going on. That's something that doesn't.
No, I'm more dumbfounded.
But last point, let's.
But just as you talk. I'm thinking in my head, a guy in 2016 drove from North Carolina to Washington, D.C. and shot a hole in the door because he was convinced that they were keeping kids in a basement that didn't exist there.
Of a pizzeria.
Of a pizzeria. But we got evidence coming out in court about continued pedophilia happening in a religious institution. And again, I'm not knocking the religion. I'm knocking the people that are doing this.
Well, but it says something. But it
doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't create that same feeling of anxiety for the population to want to go stop it. It's just interesting. And I wonder if that's because we have much more to look at now and not like it was a couple hundred years ago and 1,000 years ago, where the religion was kind of the main part of everyday life and the shaman or whoever.
I don't know. I don't think it's. I think
now we got QAnon, we got politics, we got so many things that people can emotionally grapple onto that maybe religion just isn't as big of a deal for us as anymore.
I don't know. I don't think that would explain why the
specifically
suspicion,
ignore
the suspicion of something will drive someone to that extent, while as the confirmed decade-long thing is like, oh, next, click to what's the next story? So
well, it's sad. You're right. Maybe we're just it's from that specific institution, which is sad, very sad.
Yeah. So that to me, and again, I'm not saying that people should be driving around shooting holes in churches, but it's just the fact that I'm glad you clarified that. So if it happens, it's not going to be blamed on you. I'm glad you clarified. But the fact that doesn't resonate, I just can't make sense of what that means in our society right now. So, but I think we can wrap from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call.
That was fun.
The podcast. Yeah. And check us out. Check out our prior topic today on Saving Capitalism documentary, and check us out next week. And we'll see you then.